Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to our stream today. We have some really exciting, a brand new slate of Marvel Comics solicits to go ahead and jump into. Frankly, I think this is some of the most exciting time of the month for me because over at Marvel Comics, they're just introducing some brand new covers for my favorite books right now, which happen to be the X-Men titles. We have so many interesting new like status quos and scenarios with characters featuring some of our favorite heroes like Kamala Khan. We are going to be getting all over that into this stream today. But first, I just wanted to quickly mention here some of our reviews that we posted up over the last week on the YouTube channel. We started the week over on Tuesday by talking about the excellent and phenomenal run from The Flash from Cy Spurrier and Mike Deodato Jr. I am such a big fan of that really just insane and mind-boggling run over on the series. It's really interesting to see Wally and how his kids are starting to develop and foster some of their new powers. That issue was really all about Wally's son Jai, and it was so cool seeing Jai interact with the mysterious character known as Professor Pilgrim. So I'm really happy to see how that book is developing. But right now, in terms of like comic book superheroes, especially with ongoing series, I'm really looking at books that are developing a strong sense of a supporting cast. And in that sense, I think that The Flash is one of the best, like, family oriented superhero ongoing series that we have over at Marvel and DC right now. Elsewhere, we also had the distinct pleasure of covering our endlessly hyped issue of the resurrection of Magneto. I thought that issue was just an absolute blast. Really seeing Storm come to grips with the current situation of the X-Men during the fall of the House of X. So interesting in the way that she sees kind of this premonition of Magneto that leads her to go on this great journey to try and resurrect him is just such a wonderful story scenario for Al Ewing to play into. The artwork in that book from Luciano Vecchio is just absolutely wild. And plus, I think the big thing about Resurrection of Magneto that had me interested in like each and every page are just the weird combination of supporting cast characters that we've seen from X-Men Red, or even, some other characters that are steeped deep within X-Men lore and history. I am so happy that after we spent such a long time hyping up that comic book series, that it actually came out in a really good shape there. Some of the books that we've talked endlessly about, and I've sat here and just, talked on and on and on, haven't quite turned out the way I thought, even though I think most do end up meeting my expectations. I just keep thinking about Gods and how I'm currently just, not even interested in checking out some of the interiors, despite just all these moments that we spent hyping up some of the material. That being said, though, both of these books this week are just absolutely phenomenal. I know in addition to the Resurrection of Magneto, we also talked just really extensively about the Flash series right before Cy Spurrier was on board. So happy that these projects are working out roughly as I am anticipating, and I'm so excited to dive into Marvel Comics solicits with you today. My name is Arakko Braddock, and I want to officially welcome you over to our stream. It is my absolute favorite time of the month. Seeing some of these brand new comics fills me with so much energy, just gets me so jazzed about Marvel and the upcoming story scenarios. We are currently going to check out these books shipping in April, which I think is interesting because it's like 1 month before Free Comic Book Day, where I think we're going to get our first tease at the X-Men from the Ashes reboot. So without further ado here, why don't we go ahead and just see how Marvel is looking to wind down the Krakoan era. Plus, over in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man, that book is actually headed to issue 50. That's one of the comics that we've been covering most in depth over on our YouTube channel. So I think it's going to be really interesting to watch Amazing Spider-Man shift from a book centered around like Spider-Man's, criminal network over to just whatever Zeb Wells and John Romita Jr. have in store for issue 50 of the series. It also seems like Jerry Duggan's X-Men is probably set to wind down really soon as well. That has been just an excellent run with artists like Joshua Cassara. Without further ado here, let's go ahead and jump into Marvel Comics solicits. Of course, I'm pulling this over from our favorite place at Adventures in Poor Taste here. This one is written from David Brooke. The full Marvel Comics releases are out in April 2024 and are now available to peruse. Scroll down to see what's happening with Spider-Man, the Avengers, Marvel's event Blood Hunt, and more. In the surprise department, Marvel's got a few exciting trades you didn't see coming, like a new edition of Mystic and new editions for Avengers, Spider-Man, and more. Many series were already revealed, like Roxon Thor and Darth Maul Black, White, and Red. I'm just really excited to talk about this Roxon Thor development because even though I'm not like the biggest fan of the Immortal Hulk, I also had the opportunity to go ahead and check back in on that status quo. I also have quite a lot to say about Marvel's upcoming Blood Hunt event that's spinning out of the main Avengers title. I'll get into that in just a moment as we check out the solicit. Without further ado here, let's go ahead and read the solicit for the comic book that I was just talking about. That is Blood Hunt over at Marvel Comics. Give me one moment here. We'll go ahead and pull this up. So while this is loading, just a couple things I wanted to say about Blood Hunt is I can't help but be a little bit skeptical about this comic book because it is coming out as the end result of Jed MacKay's Avengers run. This is another one of those comic books that I was really hyping up, featuring art from CF Via. I've really liked a lot of Jed MacKay's previous work on like Doctor Strange and Moon Knight. I thought the premise for this series was so interesting as King the Conqueror was fighting some new villains in the Marvel Universe with Mutant and the Twilight Court. But sadly, I think the main Avengers series has spent almost over half a dozen issues kind of like circling their tail and not really moving that storyline forward. So for me, it felt like I'm just having a little bit of a disconnect, latching onto the main Avengers series. I am really hoping that Blood Hunt is going to be the start maybe of the second year of that book getting a little bit more interesting. I like so much of Jed MacKay's previous work, and I can't imagine that he would be a bad fit for the Avengers property. Plus, I think one of the most exciting things about Blood Hunt is the art. As you can tell from this cover that we have up on the screen, Pepe Larraz, like a founding, excellent Krakoan artist, is just, I think, one of Marvel's absolute best artists, period. There's just such a beautiful, like, curvy line that he implements for all these characters and still has such strong poses and expressions. Another aspect of Blood Hunt that I think is really interesting that actually sets it apart, from some other Marvel Comics events and from the main Avengers series, is the fact that the book is also centering around a story about vampires. So I'm really intrigued to see if the Avengers book that's been focused on like Mutant and the Twilight Court is going to be able to shift to introduce some of these vampire elements and still have the book feel cohesive. Without further ado, let's go ahead and check out Marvel Comics solicits for Blood Hunt issue 1. The bloodiest Marvel event ever. The skies have gone dark, the sun is hiding its face from the carnage to come. The children of the night, the vampires, have risen from the dark in hidden places of the world as one to drown the Marvel Universe in blood. Earth's final night has fallen, or even the heroes of this doomed world stem the tide of the blood that is to come. Join the Avengers, Blade, Bloodline, Spider-Man, Hunter's Moon, Tigra, Doctor Strange, and Clea as the Dance of Death begins in Blood Hunt issue 1 on sale in May. I think the solicit is written well. I think the team of just Marvel characters assembled for this story are also super interesting. I'm really happy in particular to see Tigra represented because Tigra was such a strong supporting character over in Jed MacKay's Moon Knight run. Hunter's Moon, also another cool character from Jed MacKay's Moon Knight run. I'm also seeing that maybe some of the elements of Moon Knight are setting up this upcoming series. I know also Marvel's current Blade ongoing is also probably setting up a couple plot threads for this storyline as well. There was also an announcement of a Red Band edition over for Blood Hunt, which I think is a little bit interesting. I'm going to see if the solicit for this Red Band is any different than the main one. It is. It is. Okay, so let's go ahead and check out the solicit for the Red Band, the mature audiences version of Blood Hunt, also on sale in April from Marvel Comics. Of course, this one has the same creative team with Jed MacKay and Pepe Larraz. There will be more blood, expanded and unexpurgated, and polybagged for your protection. The Red Band edition of Blood Hunt 1 contains additional pages of unexpurgated material that are too explicit for the regular edition. And this one also is coming in at a pretty penny at $7.99. So man, that is just a shocking way for Marvel to charge like an entrance fee to one of their biggest comic book event series. Unfortunately, I think this is just going to be the standard going forward from the big two. And I hope maybe eventually at some point, if a miracle comes to pass, that the publishers eventually will kind of lower these prices in order to get maybe more fans interested in checking out some of these new books. Afro SF, thank you so much for coming aboard our stream today. Please don't give heavy spoilers for Gods. Joking, it's your show. Indeed, indeed, no spoilers for Gods here. I'm barely even checking out that book. You know, I'm still a fan of the visuals in that series from Valerio Schiti and Marte Gracia, and I still think the ambition for Gods is just absolutely phenomenal. I will be reading Timeless, Gods 4, and Miracle Man, The Silver Age 7 after your show. After with Steph, I think we probably will do a little bit of coverage for Miracle Man, The Silver Age issue 7. Maybe tomorrow, if not next week. I read that issue and I thought it was just absolutely wonderful. I'm so excited to see where, like, Neil Gaiman, where Mark Buckingham are headed next with that book. And I think that last issue was just amazing. Okay, without further ado, let's check out the next issue of Avengers Twilight. This one is interesting. It's almost like Marvel's version of Kingdom Come characters, with various heroes positioned in the future here. This one written by Chip Zdarsky, featuring art from Daniel Lacuna, with covers from just the absolute GOAT Alex Ross here, also contributing some artwork to the core Kingdom Come book as well. America and democracy are under attack. Can the Avengers of Tomorrow save a country from itself as their greatest enemy dismantles everything Captain America holds dear? It's a battle decades in the making, and no one is safe. I want to be totally honest here. I think there's some really interesting aspects to Avengers Twilight, but as I was reading the debut issue of that book, I was a little bit concerned about what makes Avengers Twilight different from Kingdom Come. I see so many of these like similar story elements here, like, kind of like a post-apocalyptic future set a couple years into the future, not that far into the future, like kind of like a disgruntled, a disheveled Captain America. I just didn't quite see a story hook in that comic book series. Although, I do think that Daniel Lacuna is probably one of the best and like most expressive artists at Marvel Comics, period. This is a cover illustrated by him, taking on the new character of Hawkeye over at Marvel. I just think the way that he's able to like shade in, some of these covers really puts him in a very fascinating position among Marvel's other artists. Acuna has just such an interesting sense of line. I can always see that it's his art when I'm looking at it. And I do think that his just introductions over to Avengers Twilight has made that book even stronger than it would have been, if you had a different artist covering that series. So overall here, I think Avengers Twilight may have some room to grow. I don't think it's a bad comic book by any means. I just don't necessarily see what makes this series, interesting, or what sets it apart from other kind of post-apocalyptic Marvel series. Although this cover is just absolutely amazing, though, from Kafu. Really been appreciating some of Kafu's Marvel work. I think there's something about the way that Kafu can take elements of really new Marvel Comics continuity and make them look like fine art, like almost like tapestry. So really just interesting stuff here over from Kafu. Next up, let's go ahead and cover the upcoming issue of Ultimate Spider-Man. This is a series that I'm really hoping is going to be able to win me over with some interesting plot developments. I enjoyed the first issue of Ultimate Spider-Man, I would say kind of like trepidatiously. There were various aspects about that comic book that really kind of held me at arm's length, mostly stemming between some of the familiarity that we've already seen with this Ultimate Spider-Man, and I would say maybe some of the Spider-Man films, We get the setup of like J. Jonah Jameson at the Daily Bugle. We get a Harry Osborn. We get Mary Jane. There's just so many aspects of this comic book that are similar to other adaptations of Spider-Man that I was really just hoping Jonathan Hickman was really going to swing for the fences here. There was an interesting cliffhanger towards the end of the first issue of Ultimate Spider-Man, introducing more plot threads from Ultimate Invasion and Tony Stark. I'm really hoping that there's going to be an interesting way that our creative team with art from Marco Cicchetto is going to be able to follow up on that previous issue. Without further ado, let's check out the solicit for Ultimate Spider-Man issue 4. Peter Parker's secret life starts fraying from the edges of his personal life. J. Jonah Jameson and Ben Parker's pursuit of the truth, or at least the news, stirs unrest with the world at large. And now that Spider-Man may have to operate alone, the real work of rebuilding this corrupt world can begin. Perfect. I'm just going to take a quick break here. And now let's go ahead and check in on the solicit. So one thing about Ultimate Spider-Man that is really interesting is that Peter Parker, at least at first, is seemingly trying to live a secret life with his alter ego as Spider-Man. Also, I do think the plot line with Jay Jonathan and Ben Parker trying to find, a different way to report the news, trying to find like a different business venture to pursue is also like a pretty great plot thread here. And we also have the idea that Spider-Man may not have to operate alone. The real work of rebuilding this corrupt world can begin. So in terms of that last sentence, I'm really hoping maybe what that means is Spider-Man is going to become more involved in what the Ultimates and what Tony Stark are doing in that main comic book. But I'm just hoping that there's something else. There's maybe one additional plot thread to make Ultimate Spider-Man feel different or interesting. I'm also hoping that, the storyline upcoming with Green Goblin isn't going to be as simple as Peter Parker fighting against Harry as the Green Goblin again, because I also think that's just going to be so similar to some of the older Spider-Man films that a lot of Spider-Man readers have already seen there. So I am really trepidatiously looking forward to an upcoming issue of Ultimate Spider-Man. I am really hoping that Hickman and Cicchetto are going to be able to find a way to make this series stand out from so many different Spider-Man comics that we've already seen previously here. Okay, let's go ahead and check in on Marvel Comics' Ultimate X-Men. Ultimate X-Men for me is so thrilling because Peach Momoko is not only writing, but illustrating the series as well. This is the second issue of the series featuring the new character of May Storm, firmly implemented over on the cover here. The Ultimate X-Men go back to school. High school, that is. It's a new school year for Hisako as she tries to get a grasp on her new powers, where she meets a cool, white-haired punk girl named May, aka Maystorm, who understands all too well the challenges Hisako faces. And they team up to embark on a creepy adventure to learn who is behind the creepy shadow that has been haunting and taunting them. Nobody except me, thank you so much for coming aboard to our stream today. As usual, I think there is so much potential within the pages of Ultimate X-Men. We've also gotten just a really great preview of what Peach Momoko has in store for this new series. It really feels like the character of Armor is meeting up with Maystorm as they're just in the middle of class. And Armor just has this mysterious kind of plot development that's very similar to an obscure anime called Fooly Cooly, where she's kind of pulling this toy, this figurine out of her head that almost mirrors some of her armor powers. So just frankly, I think the design aesthetic for Ultimate X-Men is just interesting enough. But these characters of Maystorm and Hisako is Armor just hopefully will have a really interesting future as the new Ultimate Universe develops. I think out of all the Ultimate books so far, this one has the potential to be the most interesting because Peach Momoko brings an Eastern style that I think is just so much different than all of the other books combined. Nobody except me, lol. I remember FLCL. I know, I feel like that is the most similar thing that I could reference in terms of what we saw to those opening pages over with armor in that series. Such a big fan of that show as well, and I think that's just a really interesting way to compare and contrast these series together. This is one of the first times I've seen this cover with Maystorm on Ultimate X-Men. This is just absolutely beautiful. I never really had a chance to check out the old Ultimate X-Men run, so I'm just so happy that we're going to be able to check in on this book on the ground floor. Next up, we have the new Ultimate Black Panther series. This one also really, really interesting from Marvel, as it's set to introduce Ultimate Storm and Killmonger. We learned in one of our recent streams here that the duo are actually set to be a couple within the new Ultimate Universe. So this is issue 3 of the series, once again written by Brian Hill, featuring artwork from the incredible Stefano Caselli. Enter Storm and Killmonger. Black Panther takes matters into his own hands and embarks on a covert solo mission to deal with Ra and Khonshu directly. Wakanda's conflict with Moon Knight has escalated, even with spies all across the continent feeding information. Wakanda is overwhelmed. Afro SF is Ultimate X-Men set in Japan. I don't have anything in the solicit hinting at that, but I think you may be onto something there. I'll go ahead and check in on that, and we'll report back very, very soon. Really good eye there. Okay, in terms of Ultimate Black Panther, there's a lot to be excited about here. First of all, I think Ultimate Black Panther is doing something really interesting in how it's combining those elements of like Black Panther as well as Moon Knight with Ka and with Ra and Khonshu. I think that is just so thrilling here. Also, just hearing that Wakanda has a direct conflict with the Moon Knight property, really fascinating. I just think it's so cool that Brian Hill is really trying to transcend genres and really squeeze some of these Marvel characters together in fascinating ways. Because not only do we have Storm from the X-Men introduced within the pages of Ultimate Black Panther, but we have Moon Knight too. We also saw a tease that the Maker is coming to a future issue of Ultimate Black Panther. So it really seems, just due to some of these covers alone, that there's like a billion plot threads being spun in this upcoming series. So even though I would say this is probably, one of the most obscure upcoming Ultimate comic series, it's probably one that you're going to want to pay attention to still. Yeah, really love some of the designs from Peach Momoko on the brand new Ultimate Storm. We also had a chance to check in on this within the context of a previous stream too. Okay, it looks like this is a brand new Deadpool launch here. This one is written by Cody Ziegler, featuring artwork from Roge Antonio with a cover from Taran Clark. I am not a Deadpool fan, but I'm still interested in what Deadpool is going to be doing in his brand new series. Let's go ahead and check this one out. A new era for the Merc with the Mouth, and a gun and a sword. Cody Ziegler has a wild ride planned for the Merc with the Mouth, introducing a terrifying new villain who won't stop until he catches Wade in his death grip. But all work and no play makes Deadpool a very dead boy. So I can't say we have very much context from this solicit. We have the introduction of a new villain, a terrifying new villain who it looks like we don't have the name of within the context of the solicit. I do think it's interesting that we have Cody Ziegler writing this brand new Deadpool book. He previously wrote Miles Morales. I feel like we're seeing him pop up in so many different places. I can't say I've seen the artwork for Roge Antonio or really know what it looks like, but I feel like I've heard good things. So I think this is kind of a cool up-and-coming creative team on the brand new Deadpool series from Marvel Comics. I probably won't be checking it out, but if anybody in chat is, let me know how this one turns out here. Up next, we have Spider-Gwen Ghost Spider. This one written by Stephanie Phillips, artwork from Chris Campana. Welcome to New York. Gwen truly becomes a ghost spider when she moves full-time to the universe where Gwen Stacy died years ago. But why did she leave Earth 65? Why aren't the other spiders supposed to know she's here? Why isn't she supposed to suit up and who will get hurt when she does. Okay, so this is the first I've heard of a Ghost Spider, Gwen Stacy, kind of returning to the place where she previously was at. I think that's kind of an interesting premise, but I'm still not really sold on the character of, Spider Gwen, Ghost Spider within the context of Marvel. I still don't see like a really interesting story hook to get me immersed within that ongoing series. Once again, here, I'm hoping something changes, and I do think there's a pretty solid creative team here with Stephanie Phillips writing the series. I think this Mark Brooks cover is really, really wonderful as well here. Okay, Spider Man Shadow of the Green Goblin is written by J.M. DeMatteis, featuring artwork from Michael Esta Maria and a cover from Paulo Siqueira. So this one is looking to flesh out a storyline regarding the original Green Goblin. Norman Osborn was not the first Goblin. Norman is the Green Goblin you know, but he is not the original Goblin. Learn the shocking secrets of the Proto-Goblin and its dramatic connection to the Osborn family. What role does a younger Peter Parker, who has not yet understood his great power and responsibility, play into this unfolding of events? J.M. DeMatteis continues to build his legacy in the mythos of classic Spider lore, this time paired with rising star Michael Sta Maria. Yeah, J.M. DeMatteis is such like an important writer over in the pantheon of Marvel Comics. So happy to see him returning to a Spider-Man series. That being said, I'm a little bit frustrated right now with Marvel. I think there are so many cool legacy creators who they've recently recruited into writing some of these series, but it seems like Marvel always has them, write stories that are outside of the main continuity. I would love it if J.M. DeMatteis could maybe like collaborate with Zeb Wells on like a future Spider-Man story arc, or if he was able to take control of maybe like an ancillary character and flesh out his own series. Marvel lately has also done a pretty good job utilizing some story elements and continuity from plot threads like this and introducing it within the main line. If they take this like proto-goblin character and introduce it within the context of the main Spider-Man book, I'd be pretty interested to see how that turned out. Not really sure what to say about Spider-Man Shadow of the Green Goblin as of right now, but you should at least have it on your radar from the creative team here. That is a truly amazing cover. Let's see if we can figure out who illustrated this one. Okay, I'm seeing right now, this is Mike Del Mundo. Mike Del Mundo is so good at building just that really like visceral imagery that absolutely captures my imagination just every time I see some of his work. Amazing, amazing cover from Mike Del Mundo here. Okay, cool stuff. Let's check out our next issue. This one is going to be a lot of fun. I want to be totally honest here. My opinions with Immortal Hulk might get me canceled on this stream right now. Immortal Thor. Immortal Thor right now is written over from Al Ewing, featuring art from Ibrahim Robertson and a cover from Alex Ross. This is issue 9 of the ongoing series. So I had a lot of problems with Immortal Thor when it first debuted over at Marvel, and I think a lot of those issues are still there. First and foremost, this series is just way too wordy. I really think Al Ewing needs to like edit some of his dialogue, because some of the story scenarios in the book are super interesting, but just the amount of dialogue readers have to sit through to get introduced to some of the story aspects is just absolutely maddening, at least for me as a reader. But there's these really interesting cliffhangers with the character of Dario Agger currently trying to take over Marvel Comics within their own fictional universe that is just so amazing. Al Ewing continuously ends issues of Immortal Thor with this character kind of planning his hostile takeover over at Marvel Comics. And I also had the pleasure over the last couple days, too, of figuring out just what happened to Dario Agger. Last I saw of him, he was over in Marvel Comics' Thor series, just giving the heat over to Jane Foster. So I had the pleasure of learning Dario Agger's assault into monstrosity over in the Immortal Hulk series, and checking back in with him on Immortal Thor as he plans his like takeover of Marvel Comics is just such an absolutely insane plot thread. I am just on board with whatever Al Ewing is cooking with this story. Cannot wait to see how it develops here. I believe we left off with the Enchantress, planning something of her own in terms of whatever Dario Agger has in store here. Let's see what the Enchantress has over on Immortal Thor issue 9. The Enchantress of Worlds, the son of Odin, came to the citadel of Roxon to make for the sake of the earth itself. But his enemies were waiting to steal from him the one thing that was Thor's alone, and they had crafted the foulest weapons to do it. This is the story of the immortal Thor and of the trap he could not escape. Another aspect about this series I think is really amazing is just how the Enchantress is kind of taking a Marvel Comics issue and just tearing it right in half. I think this is a really interesting way to reference the subversive and meta nature for the main Immortal Thor book as well here. Also have some really beautiful covers coming in from artists like Sergio Davila, as well as Nick Bradshaw. We got a chance to check out this teaser image too, introducing the idea of Dario Agger, as well as the Roxxon-influenced Thor. In fact, let's go ahead and cover this Roxxon Thor issue right now. This is Roxxon Presents Thor #1, also written by Al Ewing, this one featuring art by Greg Land. So it looks like Dario Agger may have been successful in his hostile takeover of Marvel Comics. Let's read a little bit more about what the Roxxon Thor is up to. From the pages of Immortal Thor, the Roxxon Age of Comics begins. In his secret identity as AI spokesguru Chad Hammer, the son of Odin knows Mama Gaia is a top priority for heroes and business. But when a group of insane environmental activists take saving the Earth too far, it's time to show the wisdom on both sides as Thor. But which god of evil is prompting the kids to rebel? Could it be Loki, god of evil? Featuring an all-star cast of heroes, Minotaur, Executioner, Enchantress, and the Thor Truck. This is the story of the Roxxon Thor, and it's a vital part of the Absolute Absolution mega event. Yeah, I think this is surprisingly interesting, given the fact that this is really just meant to be a joke series. Although we do have a lot of commentary on this. First and foremost, I'm a little bit sad that Greg Land is contributing art to this book. Greg Land is known to trace some of the faces for his various characters, and every time I look at his figures, I wonder if he's copying a face from someone else, or if this is truly an original work within the state of comics here. But just like the sheer ambitious nature of this story, I think is still going to shine through maybe what some of the artwork is bringing to the forefront. I love the idea of the son of Odin, undercover, knowing Mama Gaia is a top priority. I think so much of the solicit is written in a really quirky context. To me, it seems like in order to really sell this story, Al Ewing is going to absolutely have to dial back in terms of the narrative and just the amount of dialogue written within his Thor run. I will say within the sequences where Dario Agger shows up at the end of Immortal Thor issues, it feels like some of the dialogue is pared down within those sequences, or at least Dario Agger has a lot more to say compared to Thor describing his actions and then doing his actions while talking about it still there. I think the character of Minotaur is so interesting. I hope he sticks around in the long haul over for Immortal Thor. And I'm just really interested that somebody found a way to utilize Roxxon in a context that makes this group of supervillain scientist characters seem interesting again. So really cool stuff over on board for the Immortal Thor. I hope Al Ewing can kind of change his execution slightly on Immortal Thor in order to reap the rewards of his super ambitious premise. Right now, I am trying to be a major champion over for Kid Venom at Marvel Comics. This is the start of Kid Venom's brand new comic book series. It's a 4-issue title, and the thing that really has me interested about Kid Venom is it's written and illustrated by Taigami. Taigami, another just Eastern creator who has a much different aesthetic than what we've seen from so many other creators at Marvel. And I also thought that the debut, that one shot for Kid Venom, was nothing short of phenomenal. I love how much different, some of these other creators lend just these story scenarios that are just a little bit different than what you've seen with traditional Marvel Comics characters. Let's learn a little bit about Kid Venom in this brand new solicit for the first issue of his new series. Embrace your inner Venom. Japan 977, Kid Venom has made his presence known to the evil symbiotes, taking people and creatures hostage. But who else has their eye on Kintaro and his symbiote? The world of Kid Venom expands as new characters and dangers are revealed. Breakout manga creator Taigami continues his vision of Kid Venom in this brand new series. A couple years ago, it's really interesting how Marvel was starting to recruit novelists towards some of their main series or just writers. Like, I remember how we had Ta-Nehisi Coates on board with the main Black Panther series. We started to see like Eve Ewing, as well as, let's see, who is the current writer on She-Hulk? Rainbow Rowell. Just people who were more familiar with the literary world heading over to comics. I feel like the end result of that has given some just really great story ideas and just some really interesting new talent. I think Rainbow Rowell has been wonderful on the She-Hulk comic. But really hoping here that Taigami is no exception. Would love to see Taigami kind of foster this character of Kid Venom for the long haul, and that Taigami will be able to stick around at Marvel Comics for quite a while. You owe it to yourself to check out that one shot that's now available physically for Kid Venom. The artwork, the writing is beautiful, and there's a really interesting origin story for Kid Venom and his symbiote as well. Cannot encourage you to check out this brand new series enough. All right, let's check back on Symbiote Spider-Man 2099. This is issue 2 of a 5-issue limited series written by Peter David, featuring artwork yet again from Roge Antonio and a cover from Lionel Francis Yu. This one, very exciting for me because Peter David is getting the chance to write Spider-Man 2099 again. I've loved some of his other series. Let's see what he has in store for this more symbiote-esque version of Spider-Man 2099. Versus Venom 2099. Miguel O'Hara's oldest foe, the Venom of 2099, is back and out for blood. Not just Miguel's, but his entire company's. No one is safe while these two titans clash. So Miguel has no choice but to power himself up with the symbiote, the likes of which the world has never seen. Excuse me. Miguel's gotten what he wanted out of the deal, but what does this hostile alien organism need in return? I love how Marvel Comics has been taking like 2 or 3 plot threads and then kind of like weaving them together to make really, really insane story scenarios. I think that this like symbiote Spider-Man 2099 is such a great extension of that idea. The way that Peter David has like been writing these like alternate symbiote Spider-Man stories is so engrossing, but then utilizing the symbiote aspects with Spider-Man 2099 is just a super subversive way to continue Peter David's work with Spider-Man 2099 in just a slightly different direction here. Afro SF, most novelists are not very good at writing comics, in my opinion. It's a different skill. Joe Hill can do it well, and Ian Rankin wasn't bad at it. No, I agree with you, but for some reason, I feel like a lot of the talent that Marvel poached a couple years ago actually worked out pretty well. And you're right, Afro SF, it does depend on like which individual creator is working on it. Especially as you see like creators from other mediums like like superstars or like music artists writing comics. It's interesting to see like who's been able to stick around and who hasn't. We've even seen like some, fairly popular musicians like Gerard Way, as well as like Max Bemis try and write comics with actually fairly positive results. So yeah, once again, it's interesting to see like who is actually good at writing comics from the world of prose and who isn't. But I would definitely say that between people like Eve Ewing and Rainbow Rowell, those are 2 names at Marvel that have been producing a lot of really consistent work for a really long time. The Spectacular Spider-Man issue 2, written by Greg Weisman, featuring art and cover by Umberto Ramos. Let's see, Arachnobatics continues, surprising anyone who knows Peter Parker, but probably not those who know Miles Morales. The Spider-Men have been keeping their weekly meetup at the Coffee Bean. Sadly, that hasn't given them any insight into the machinations of the Jackal. And what do all these mysterious interludes add up to? I like the way Greg Weisman has written Spider-Man over in the animated Spectacular Spider-Man series. Really interested to see how he's going to be able to write Miles Morales alongside Peter Parker with this series. Also, I'm interested to see if Umberto Ramos's anatomy can maybe appeal to me a little bit more than it has in the past. I would definitely say that in terms of Miles Morales' limbs in the issue, it's definitely breaking some of my immersion in the story, but I do think Ramos is getting better as an artist as the years go by at Marvel. I'd be really interested to see like what a main run on the Amazing Spider-Man title would look like from Greg Weisman. I'm interested to see if Marvel is going to continue to tap him in the future as these series develop here. So I'm going to keep a close eye on Spectacular Spider-Man. I'm really hoping that I enjoy this issue as much as I loved his cartoon in the past. Edge of Spider-Verse. So we're going to go through this one pretty quickly, but we will take a look at this super interesting Peach Momoko cover that looks like it's taking on the Ben Reilly costume. Oh no, I lied. We're going to be talking about this in a lot of detail because it features writing from Justina Ireland and Steve Folks. We have artwork from Pete Woods and more. And it looks like the main cover on the series was from Chad Hardin. Introducing Star Spider. Your neighborhood can be a few blocks long, or it can be the size of an entire space station. Star Spider slings through the stars in her silk ship, helping those in need. The whipping through alien cityscapes, don't miss the coolest new spider hero to grace the comics page. Also in this issue, Web Weaver returns. One of the coolest new characters of the Spider-Verse is back, kicking butt, taking names, and looking good while doing it. Oh my goodness, Marvel is covering so much Spider-Man content right now. It's insane. They are creating so many new Spider characters. And frankly, I think this is probably just for the Spider-Verse films, but it is just really hard to be enthusiastic about a brand new Spider-Man character when we've just seen, I don't know, dozens over the past couple years. Still, I have so much faith in Steve Folks as a creator. Wonder if he's going to be able to create an interesting story in the middle of this extreme Spider-Man fatigue that I think we all have. Okay. Let's go ahead and jump into Jackpot and Black Cat. This, for me, is super interesting because of the relationship that Mary Jane and Felicia have been developing within the past few years of Spider-Man. This one written by Celeste Bronfman, featuring art by Emilio Laiso, and we have just a very strange cover from Adam Hughes. I think the facial expressions on Mary Jane and like Felicia herself just look really, really weird. Much of New York City is out to kill Mary Jane Watson, including Black Cat. There's something sinister going on, and it's tied to a classic Marvel villain with ties to our co-stars. Yeah, so I have to say, I was not as big of a fan of the Gang War one-shot with Jackpot that came out very recently from Marvel. I am hoping that, Bronfman and Lyso will be able to follow up on that with a stronger story that has more of like a clear, purpose and more of a clear way to continue telling the story for some of these characters. I just have no idea where Marvel Comics is going with Black Cat. I feel like at one point they were, headed into a relationship between Felicia and Peter Parker, but Zeb Wells quickly broke them up very shortly after bringing them together. And at this point, I just have no idea if Peter is going to pursue a relationship with her or just kind of like spin in his own direction. It feels like Peter has just been so busy within the scope of his main series, like bouncing from storyline to storyline, just kind of reacting to it. and I just don't feel like he has very much agency right now as a character. I'd be interested to see if Marvel Comics is going to change that and maybe pit Felicia back with Spider-Man, as this cover seems to suggest, but I wouldn't base my inference on just a variant cover over from Marvel. Once again, I'm glad that Felicia and Mary are continuing to be friends. I think there's something interesting about how opposite they are as characters and about how they start to influence each other. And I also think that another aspect that's kind of holding back the characterization from Black Cat and Mary Jane as Jackpot is just the fact that they don't have an ongoing series to kind of riff off of each other, and that they keep meeting up at like different points and like different moments in time here. I'd really like Jed McKay to kind of write their duo together, because I think some of the sensibilities that he lent to the storyline with the two characters during Dark Web was really, really interesting. Once again, I'm hope that Marvel will find a way to get me interested again in Jackpot and Black Cat. I'm just not sure what it's going to take right now. Frankly, our next comic is very, very exciting. This is the second issue. No, this is the third issue of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, coming in from writer Steve Orlando, featuring art from Lorenzo Tameta. And we also have just a wonderful cover here from Russell Dauterman, featuring Quicksilver here. With the Wizard and his frightful 400 hot on their trails, the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver are scrambling to separately unravel the mystery of the Wizard's new arsenal and motivations. But when the investigation brings the twins together again, will they be able to put their differences aside long enough to take down an enemy who wants to tear them apart forever? Yeah, I'm very optimistic about the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver series. I feel like the main Scarlet Witch series ended way, way too soon. I'm glad that Marvel is like following up that book with, another title written from the same creative team of Orlando, featuring art from Tameta. And I'm once again very interested in how this one is going to turn out. Again, if this is just more of a pedestrian story featuring Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver battling the Wizard, I'm not sure how truly interesting it's going to be. I really hope that there's going to be more of an emphasis on characters like Agatha Harkness, within this miniseries too, because I think just the meta narrative of what Scarlet Witch was building with all these disparate characters like Joseph was super, super interesting. And I hope that some of those plot threads are going to be able to stick around within Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Absolutely wonderful covers from artists like Romy Jones, Juan Campbell, and Russell Dauterman on this book. All right, let's go ahead and check in on Black Widow and Hawkeye. For me, this one is a lot more interesting than it usually would be, because currently Black Widow is taking on a brand new symbiote of her own. Black Widow and Hawkeye issue 2, written by Stephanie Phillips, featuring artwork from Paolo Vianelli and a cover from Steven Segovia. What tensions between Black Widow's symbiote and Hawkeye put Clint's life in danger? Natasha will have to decide where her loyalties lie and what she's willing to do to prove it. Meanwhile, Clint's enemies are moving in fast, and their uniforms seem awfully familiar. Yeah, I think Black Widow and Hawkeye has a chance to be a really solid miniseries over at Marvel. Stephanie Phillips has actually written some great comics recently, and I think that Black Widow right now is just a lot more interesting than she has been recently, because of the way that she's been able to team up with Dylan in order to save Bren within the scope of the main Venom book right now. Also, Hawkeye's very interesting character. I am loving this cover here, illustrated by the excellent Jesus Size, which also kind of contrasts the history of these two characters with some of their original outfits behind them here. Okay, next up, let's go ahead and cover one of our biggest series. I have been such a big fan of what Marvel Comics has been doing with Miss Marvel lately. I feel like Kamala Khan continues to be one of the most interesting new point of view characters of the X-Men here. I think she's created just so many wonderful interactions with Marvel's mutants in the wake of the recent Hellfire Gala. The first series over for Miss Marvel as an X-Men was an absolute joy to read. I think it just had wonderful writing over from Iman Vellani and Saber Perzada. Plus, we got just beautiful artwork as well. Thankfully, Marvel is actually looking to follow up that miniseries with another one featuring a lot of the same members of the creative team. This one is called Miss Marvel Mutant Menace. And it looks like in this second issue, Kamala Khan is going to meet up with the X-Men villain known as Mojo, the infamous X-Man. Now that Kamala is very notably and very publicly an X-Man, she's attracting all sorts of attention. And you know who uses attention as currency? That's right. It's the return of the X-Men's old media mogul mastermind, Mojo. Mojo is just such like an irreverent and just insane character over at Marvel. He brings such a strong genre influence to the stories that he's involved in. I am so thrilled to see what kind of storylines Vellani and Perzada are able to dream up with a Mojo influenced Kamala Khan story. Also, this cover from Peach Momoko had me so excited to check out the solicits over at Marvel, period. I think this is just such a beautiful way to realize the way that Mojo has an influence on some of the characters. Really, really interesting stuff. I don't know if we mentioned it earlier, but there's artwork in this one from Scott Godlewski, who I've also enjoyed in the past. And the main cover is coming in from Carlos Gomez. Really hope that Marvel will continue to kind of position Kamala Khan in a way where she's going to be able to benefit from all those interactions with the X-Men characters. I am still so thrilled to see her check in with people like Synch, Talon, and Rasputin within the pages of the main X-Men series, and just hope Marvel kind of continues to bring Miss Marvel in this direction and make her like such a strong element of the X-Men supporting cast. We're going to talk about this one briefly because we covered it in a lot more depth over on our last stream, but this is the brand new Ghost Rider series. And it's very interesting because it looks like the Hood is going to take on the Spirit of Vengeance here. This is Ghost Rider Final Vengeance Issue 2, written by the excellent Benjamin Percy, featuring artwork from Danny Kim and a cover by the wonderful Juan Ferreira. The new Ghost Rider. There's a new Spirit of Vengeance in town, and he's looking to run the place. There will be no stopping this rider. The mystery of Johnny Blaze's disappearance continues. Yeah, I think this writer is probably going to be a little bit more violent than characters like Johnny Blaze, due to the Hood's just absolutely like negative ambitions or things that are fueling him as a character here. I think the new design over for the Hood as Ghost Rider is super, super cool. This cover from Juan Ferreira is nothing short of amazing here. Another just really wonderful, wonderful cover for Ghost Rider Final Vengeance number 2. What If Venom? We're going to go through this really quickly. This one written by Jeremy Holtz, featuring art by Manuel Garcia and a cover by Lionel Francis Yu. Why don't we talk about the latest issue of The Gods in a little bit more depth? I saw that Marvel was trying to tease this one a little bit by introducing that there's some revelations about Dimitri. Dimitri is one of the Gods characters known, I believe, as the Science Boy. Correct me if I'm wrong. I actually think he's probably one of the best characters in the series. The way that he always like spins quirky dialogue with characters like Wynn is really, really interesting. I hope that this new Gods issue will play into the quirky nature and also kind of pare down that dialogue, because I feel like just the sheer amount of dialogue that Jonathan Hickman puts on the page kind of once again puts me at an arm's length between my enjoyment of the issue and the actual issue itself. Really wonderful cover here from Mateus Manhanini. This is the 7th issue of Gods. Dimitri is an orphan who was born in the Cosmodrome. Out there somewhere is what he's been looking for his whole life. The way in is the way through. All you have to do is listen for the signal. You know, I think the solicits for Gods are starting to get a little bit easier to read. I remember they usually feature one element of cringe that's so bad it kind of directly interrupts my train of thought and leads to another like entire read through of the solicit. So I'm really, really glad that I was able to prevent a cringe and read through that whole one. I probably should be sticking with Gods a little bit more than I am, and I will check in with it before the miniseries closes out. I also really wonder if Marvel as a whole is going to do anything else with this property due to some of the reception of the Gods series in general. Once again, I'm going to keep a close eye on Gods as it develops. We're going to be covering it just moving forward within the scope of these streams. But once again, just due to the tepid response for this property, I'm really curious how or if Marvel Comics is just going to continue the Gods in general. If anybody else in chat is loving Gods, let me know. Okay, I think we're going to take just a very, very quick break here, and then we'll be back to cover. I think the X-Men books are up next. All right, thanks so much. I'll be back with you very soon here. Okay, thank you so much for standing by here. Why don't we go ahead and cover the latest issue of Fall of the House of X? Of course, this is one half of the dual miniseries that are set to close out the Krakoan age that are firmly influenced by the series that also started the Krakoan age as well here. So this is issue 4 of Fall of the House of X, written by Jerry Duggan, featuring artwork from Lucas Werneck and a cover from the Krakoan founding artist here, Pepe Larraz. My ally, my enemy. They say a wounded animal can be the most dangerous kind of animal to face. As the fight between the mutants and Orcus reaches a deadly pitch, a starting revelation rocks the X-Men to their core. The two series that are one come together in one horrible betrayal as the Krakoan age nears its conclusion. So I'm really wondering what the betrayal, what the revelation is in store for Fall of the House of X. I'm also really thrilled that Moira is set to return to the pages within this book as well. I'm seeing a lot of people kind of comment about how the focus on Moira was dropped within the last couple years of the most recent X-Men properties. So really glad that Marvel is going to feature that and head back within continuity. Also, I think when I kind of look back at Fall of the House of X1, there were a lot of really solid moments, But for me, it feels like there's been some elements of the X-Men property as a whole that have been kind of dangling together and haven't been resolved for such a long time here. I'm talking specifically about Orcus's capture of Cyclops. I really want to see some developments in terms of that and just something that'll move that status quo forward. In the latest issue of X-Men, Cyclops was introduced to yet another sequence where he was on trial, and we've just gotten so much of that over the past few issues that I want to make sure that Jerry Duggan isn't kind of repeating himself or being a little bit too redundant with how much he's exploring some of these same plot threads. But I do think there was so much really strong character interaction within Follow the House of X and so many great individual moments that it's really easy for me to recommend this series. I just think there's maybe a couple plot threads that are slightly too repetitious as a whole. I did really, really love Lucas Wernick's art on the main series. I think there's something interesting about the way that he has of like a curvy line that's a little bit more restrained than what you see with an artist that can be that expressive at Marvel. I think he's great at tackling books that have a lot of subtext because he's able to create these expressions for characters that hint at a much deeper meaning. Also, the focus on characters like Polaris is so interesting. I love how towards the end of the first issue, Polaris and Brood showed up, or excuse me, Brew, in a very interesting context within the scope of that book. Once again, also interested in checking in with Emma Frost during Fall of the House of X2. Right now, we've seen her embark on all these secret covert missions with Tony Stark to steal all this Mysterium and build up these Stark Sentinels across these issues. This is just an amazing kind of gatefold cover over from Brian Hitch too, focusing on so many interesting X-Men characters that we've seen recently, like Magic and Wolverine. Plus, I love this like Forge outfit with some Krakoan armor that he's rocking over in the background here. Really cool stuff over on Fall of the House of X4. I am absolutely loving that book. I'm really happy that Jerry Duggan has kind of rose to become one of the most prominent writers in the X-Men franchise as a whole, and I think Lucas Wernick's art is nothing short of beautiful. All right, let's go ahead and catch up with chat a little bit. You say there are too many Spider-Man books. There are many more Batman books. I think Leonard McFarlane is saying there's way too many Batman books right now at DC. I absolutely agree. A Pilgrim, I just read Gods, and I like that Marvel has had some variety of stories, but I think titles get dropped if they are not immediate hits. I'm surprised Aliens is still going. You know, for me, Gods makes me like a little bit viscerally angry because I feel like the problem with Gods is so simple. There's just too much dialogue, like just directly on the page. And for me, I just wonder why Marvel's editorial doesn't like stop and just take a step back and say, hey, maybe we should make this more easily to approach for new readers because we want to market this to a really big audience of new comics fans. These are like new characters who are really interesting, who we've spent so much money marketing in the back of these books. And then the issue comes out and it's like impossible to decipher. It's impossible to really read or check in on some of the like bigger machinations. And you know, it's not impossible. If you're a big Marvel fan, if you know where the pantheon of gods are, if you're familiar with like the locations and places where you know, Win goes within the course of the first issue, you will absolutely be able to decipher it. But if you're a new reader, God's #1 is probably going to be nothing short of torture. But I do want to mention here that Valerio Schiti's art is just wonderful in that main series. And just moving forward, I hope Marvel is able to just take a step back and look at some of these comics within the eyes of a brand new reader and just say, you know, how difficult is this to read versus, you know, how ambitious is the material here? And I think at some points, you know, it does bear in mind to just pare back the dialogue and make some of these books a little bit more approachable. I think, too, the thing with Gods is that not only is the dialogue just incredibly lengthy, but some of the concepts within the book are just incredibly wild as well. And I think these two elements combined together just hold readers way back, you know, in terms of enjoying that series. All right, I've complained enough about Gods. Why don't we check in on the latest issue of Rise of the Powers of 10? This is issue 4, the second to last chapter within Rise of the Powers of 10. And boy, we recently had a chance to check out the first issue of this series. I was absolutely blown away by the way that Kieran Gillen was able to build all the subtext from the main Immortal X-Men series and then interweave it back into a storyline set within the future, talking about a new group of X-Men characters where people like Sync are now the professor of the X-Men. We have Shadow Tiger lingering within the background of the series. And within the scope of the futuristic timeline, it looks like Orcus was actually successful. Towards the end of that series, we also saw the Enigma character first introduced within Defenders Rise Up. So interesting stuff within the background of Rise of the Powers of 10. Let's go ahead and see what Kieran Gillen and RB Silva have in mind for the second to last issue of this incredibly dense X-Men series. Who is Traitor X? In the aftermath of the greatest betrayal in X-Men history, the Quiet Council in exile must act. They have a plan. Can anyone or anything survive the experience? As the Krakoan Age barrels on towards its conclusion, the two series that are one converge on an act that will live in infamy. Kind of a cool Jubilee cover, but it also has me scratching my head here because she is the protagonist of the Dead X-Men series over at Marvel. So I have no idea why she's on a variant cover here. Yes, I think the Quiet Council in Exile introduced within Rise of the Powers of 10 is such an endearing concept that has led to just all these really interesting story scenarios within the book. It's so thrilling how the X-Men are like embarking on this suicide mission because of just how strong and prominent the influence of Orcus has been on this dark future in Rise of the Powers of 10. So very exciting stuff from Kieran Gillen. I hope he's able to continue fostering that sense of subtext as the series continues. I believe we talked about this last week, but oh boy, am I excited about this upcoming issue of Avengers, which is a much different sentiment that I've had on the book recently. This one is looking to tie the Avengers characters a little bit more firmly into Fall of the House of X. One really cool aspect about X-Men and Iron Man continuity that's really been crafted together is the fact that Tony is seen on this cover, issue 12, with the brand new Mysterium armor that he's been working on getting for so many previous issues of Iron Man within the Fall of the House of X backdrop. This one, once again, written by Jed McCabe, featuring art from Francesco Mortarino and a cover from comics legend Stuart Immonen. The fall of X comes for Earth's mightiest heroes. The Avengers have hung in space over the Earth, a sword of Damocles over Orcus for too long. But knowing they had only one chance to strike, they waited while Iron Man prepared. Now on his signal, it is time, and the Avengers only know one way to strike: hard. Changing the antagonist for a couple issues of Avengers, I hope, will allow Jed McKay to kind of beef up some of the plot threads and maybe accelerate the pacing of this main series. Due to the fact that we're checking out these solicits in April, I do think it's interesting that the Avengers are headed into this blood hunt storyline, and then within the scope of their main book, they're tying in to follow the House of X with the X-Men. So I think it's really interesting how Blood Hunt is divided in terms of the Marvel Universe, and I'm also a little bit thrilled to see what the Avengers book is going to look like after this X-Men storyline is wrapped up. We have another issue of Avengers. This one is chapter 13, featuring the same creative team, Jed McKay, Francesco Mortarina. This one actually has a cover from X-Men series artist Joshua Cassara. The Avengers versus the Stark Sentinel program. Orcus's counterstrike puts the Avengers on the back foot as the true extent of the Stark Sentinel program is revealed. Can Earth's mightiest heroes stand against impossible odds, or will they fall against the metal onslaught? Yeah, I think really showing a stronger presence in terms of the Stark Sentinels could lead to a very interesting scenario within the core Avengers title. Also, learning more about the influence that Tony Stark had on some of these Sentinels could prove to be an interesting story element. I am also a little bit interested if Jed MacKay is going to write into the X-Men aspect of this Avengers storyline and maybe feature any more guest stars from those books, or if it's just mainly going to be the Avengers responding to Orcus threats. Really interesting stuff within the scope of the Avengers series. And once again, I'm just hoping that after this, there's going to be maybe a switch towards a more plot oriented direction, hopefully with King the Conqueror as Avengers continues. Resurrection of Magneto. So we also had the chance to talk about the first issue of this comic book series. I was absolutely blown away by what Al Ewing and Luciano Vecchio contributed to that main book. The way that Storm got this kind of haunted premonition of Magneto within the background of that book, causing her to go on this adventure to reunite with characters from the Defenders and try and rescue Max, was just so enthralling. I love how this storyline kind of introduces aspects of like Dante's Inferno, with Storm kind of going directly into the waiting room and trying to rescue Max within the scope of this one. Let's see what the final issue of Resurrection has in store for Storm and Magneto here. Return of the King. The master of magnetism has returned to the world, but it is not the world he left, nor is Magneto the same man who left it. Okay, let's start this over one more time here. Has death changed him for the better or for the worse? And when he sees what Orcus has done to mutant kind, will it change him again? I think my biggest question for Resurrection of Magneto is just the mental state of Max himself. Towards the beginning of X-Men Red, it felt like Max had lost his will to live within the scope of that series, and I was really interested to see in Resurrection of Magneto how Max was able to interpret his new lease on life and just continue to be a founding member of the X-Men when the X-Men are in a time of such massive peril, spearheaded by the villains known at Orcus here. So I think there is so much interesting characterization to be had for Magneto, and I hope that we really get some exploration of that from Al Ewing before this series ends in earnest. And I'm also really thrilled to see Magneto join the X-Men and hopefully, spearheading a massive battle against Orcus as this age of Krakoa begins to wind down for all the X-Men series. Yeah, it really feels like next month in May is going to be a pivotal time for the X-Men as both Fall of the House of X and Rise of the Powers of 10 wind down, and we get even closer to X-Men from the Ashes. Next up, let's talk about Dead X-Men. Dead X-Men is really looking to be an important comic book over to Marvel Comics. This one's still written by Steve Fowkes, featuring artwork from Bernard Chang, David Baldeón, and Vincenzo Carato. We have a wonderful cover coming in from Lucas Werneck. And by the way, this is the fourth and final issue of Dead X-Men as well. So frankly, the reason why we're excited about this book is because Steve Fowkes has contributed wonderful work within the pages of the Dark X-Men and Spider-Woman comics at Marvel recently. I am so thrilled to see what else he's bringing on board to the X-Men. Also, the characters he's working with people like Dazzler and Jubilee, are so interesting. These are people who Nimrod violently murdered during the Hellfire Gala, who have recently come back to life with a brand new objective. I am so interested to see where Dead X-Men is headed next, and we're going to be covering the first issue of that series very soon from Marvel Comics. Let's check out the fourth issue solicit right now. Everything Ends. Prodigy, Dazzler, Frenzy, Cannonball, and Jubilee have gone farther and have risked more than any X-Men team before. Now at the end of everything, the final fate of Krakoa rests on these 5 mutants. Will the dead X-Men save the seed of the future or kill it before it can even be planted? Yeah, very thrilled about where Dead X-Men is headed next over at Marvel. And frankly, I am also just so interested in this beautiful cover on X-Men 33. This one also coming in from Jerry Duggan, featuring art and cover by Joshua Cassara. X-Men Assemble. If there were ever a time to rally the troops and take to the enemy, it's now. Stand side by side as the X-Men head for their final stand. They can't stop all of us. So I'm really thinking that May is going to be one of the last months for the Krakoa era of X-Men. It is going to be so thrilling to see our just vast team of X-Men finally rise up and strike back on Orcus just after all this time here. It's so cool how we see Doom's X-Men within the background of this issue. Also, some just really prominent underground X-Men that Jerry Duggan has been working with really since Fall of X began, with people like Sync. Let's see, I don't see Talon here, but we also have Kitty Pryde as Shadowcat, Miss Marvel, Forge. Yeah, the cast within the main X-Men series is so wonderful, and I'm glad to see Jerry Duggan just kind of following up on so many characters that he's touched base with very recently on his main X-Men run. Also, I think Joshua Cassara's art is nothing short of beautiful. I'm so excited to see his rendition of some of these other really core and prominent X-Men characters, as they have such interesting costumes with people like Kitty serving as Shadowcat here. Let's go ahead and talk about the second issue of X-Men Forever. This is set to be one of the final X-Men Krakoan series in general here. This one written by the excellent Kieran Gillen, featuring art from Luca Maresca. Also have a beautiful cover coming in from Mark Brooks. Immortal means forever. The fight for Krakoa's future begins here. Since Rise of the Powers of 10 began, there have been a few mysteries unrevealed. Now, writer Kieran Gillen fills in the gap of what happened between the end of Immortal X-Men and the beginning of the end of the Krakoan Age. This series really looking to highlight some of the main mysteries within the Krakoan era. Like a big example here is the identity of the Dominion, which has been long-term teased within the scope of this one. I am also interested in seeing characters like Jubilee, Cannonball, and Exodus. Kieran Gillen has such a great way that he's able to craft dialogue between these characters, as well as seen within his core Immortal X-Men series. So interested to see if we'll get more exchanges between people like Exodus and Hope within the context of this book too. Also, with the character of Krakoa kind of popping up recently within the fall of the House of X era, really cool to see the visuals of him battling a Stark Sentinel within this cover of X-Men Forever as well. Cool that we have a variant cover spotlighting Elixir, Joshua Foley, a mutant who's kind of off the beaten path over at Marvel too. Really phenomenal Phil Noto cover. We have the next issue of Cable from Marvel. This is chapter 3 of the series, written by legacy creator Fabian Nicieza, featuring art by Scott Eaton. I want to quickly gloss over this one and spotlight the latest issue of Invincible Iron Man, where we can see Tony featured prominently within the scope of his Mysterium armor. This is Invincible Iron Man issue 17, written by Jerry Duggan, featuring artwork from Patch Zurcher and a cover by Cale New, who's been with this series contributing covers for such a long time now. Tony Stark's greatest accomplishment may have just become the world's most advanced coffin. Trapped within a deactivated armor, Tony must face down his demons and his legacy. Can Iron Man escape? Or will Mutantkind's hopes die along with him? To me, this cover is really interesting because of the thematic elements that opened with Invincible Iron Man when the book first started. The mutant menace known as Fei Long kept pinning all these crimes over on Tony Stark, and it almost led Tony to have like a mental breakdown because he thought he was creating all these accidents and tiny elements within his workshop that led to all these disasters here. So I think it's interesting to see Tony come like face to face with some of his own technology really late within the scope of that run here too. The writing on Invincible Iron Man from Jerry Duggan has always felt so personal, with Tony kind of writing an autobiography within the captions of that book. And I'm just hoping that all these elements are still here within the core Invincible Iron Man series. I'm going to quickly gloss over Weapon X-Men. I'll mention the creative team though. We have Christos Gage writing the book with art from the wonderful Yildiray Cinar, who recently just blew my mind with solid work on X-Men Red. I love this cover from Dyke Bruin, putting the spotlight on Wolverine's family and some of the tragedy that befell him. Okay, let's talk about X-Men 97. This isn't a comic book that I usually would be interested in. However, this one is written by Steve Folks and features artwork from Salva Espin with a cover from Todd Nowak. Sabretooth strikes, and he's not the only threat the X-Men are facing as Jean Grey and Cyclops prepare to embark on a bold new adventure. A sinister foe makes his moves from the shadows, unleashing a torrent of new terror. Can an old friend turn the tide, or will it be too late to save Wolverine from being ripped to shreds? Once again, I think it's going to be so cool to see Jean Grey and Cyclops, maybe embark within the character of Mr. Sinister if this solicitation, is correct here. Yeah, X-Men 97 could be a really interesting book. It just depends on how ambitious Steve Folks is going to get with it. I usually wouldn't be interested in this, but once again, just due to the creative team, I'm much more interested in checking out this one than I would have been otherwise here. We also had the pleasure of checking out Marvel's latest issue of Wolverine within the scope of the last stream, introducing the character of X-23 into the narrative, as well as a new look over with Sabretooth. So this is Wolverine 47 from Victor Laval and Benjamin Percy, featuring artwork from Jeff Shaw and a cover from Lionel Francis Yu. Laura Kinney must escape the clutches of the savage Sabretooth. Will Victor Creed's weapons spell the end for Logan? A can't-miss issue. I think it's just so fascinating how the Wolverine series has tried to recontextualize the battle between Wolverine and Sabretooth, and doing it through brand new characters is just a really, really interesting way to expand the scope of this brand new Sabretooth war here. And this is the latest issue of Wolverine, chapter 48, once again written by Benjamin Percy, and Victor Laval, featuring artwork from Corey Smith. Creed vs. Creed, Sabretooth War Part 8. It's a family affair as Graydon Creed, the maligned son of Victor Creed, aka Sabretooth, brings the fight to his father. The winner gets Wolverine, or what's left of him. Lionel Yu has been producing some really terrifying covers on Wolverine, and I think this is one of the scariest that we've seen from him so far. I hope he really continues to introduce all these subversive elements within the scope of the main Wolverine book. Very cool variant covers. And I'm going to feature just a quick spotlight on Wolverine Madripoor Nights issue 3. This one is really worth talking about because it's written by comic book X-Men legend Chris Claremont, and it features artwork from Edgar Salazar with a cover by Philip Tan. A really beautiful and just ambitious cover from Philip Tan featured on this main book too. Okay, let's spotlight the latest giant size issue, and this is a giant size chapter over for the Incredible Hulk with Giant Size Hulk 1. This one written over from Philip Kennedy Johnson, featuring artwork from Andrea Riccardo and a cover by Brian Hitch. The only way to contain the Hulk is in a giant-sized story. Riding the rails is no walk in the park, especially for the Incredible Hulk, and particularly when something, no someone, has been stolen from him by a gruesome new threat with evil machinations in mind. Clear the tracks, the Hulk is coming through. Plus, a reprinting of Incredible Hulk 372 by Peter David and Dale Keown, featuring a high-speed, heart-rending drama and a Hulk tale for the ages. Usually these giant-size Incredible Hulk issues have one story element that really sets them apart from the others here. And I'm really interested if maybe Philip Kennedy Johnson is going to introduce a brand new character within the scope of his giant size issue, or just what big plot thread he has in mind for that series. I haven't really enjoyed the first couple giant size issues, so I'm hoping this one featuring the Hulk, written by just the wonderful Philip Kennedy Johnson, will maybe kind of stick out from the rest of that pack here. There's also some really imaginative covers featuring characters from across Hulk's just really large pantheon of villains and heroes too. Yeah, beautiful Mahmoud Asrar cover as well. Love the way that Mahmoud Asrar is able to illustrate the hair on this brand new interpretation of the Hulk character. We have a facsimile edition of The Amazing Spider Man 255, written by Tom DeFalco, featuring art and cover from Ron Friends. Okay, let's see. I'm just going to scroll past these facsimile issues, and then we're going to get into just a massive, massive comic book series. This is the latest issue of Marvel Comics' Amazing Spider-Man run. This one very exciting to me because it's bringing back the characters introduced within the Dark Web storyline, which was probably my very favorite Spider-Man storyline to date within Zeb Wells' current run. So before the core Amazing Spider-Man series, Zeb Wells wrote the Spider-Man Beyond storyline with so many other writers from Marvel Comics, and that book really focused on reintroducing Ben Reilly within the scope of the Marvel Universe, and also kind of introducing him back as Spider-Man. Ben Reilly used to be a clone of Peter Parker. Towards the end of the Spider Man Beyond storyline, the villainous Beyond Corporation started experimenting with Ben Reilly's memories and ended up turning him into the supervillain known as Chasm towards the end of that storyline. And the character of Madeline Pryor, the X-Men villain who's a clone of Jean Grey, teamed up with Ben Reilly as Chasm to try and stage an invasion of the demonic dimension known as Limbo across New York City. And while Spider-Man was able to put an end to that thanks to the X-Men, Madeline Pryor was able to reform, but Ben Reilly didn't. Ben Reilly is still back on the side of the supervillain, still manipulated by the mysterious Beyond Corporation. He is finally headed back into the main Amazing Spider-Man series, along with his love interest, Janine Godby. Janine Godby had the chance to power up some of her abilities thanks to the demonic dimension of Limbo, and is now known as the character of Hallows Eve. I have been so thrilled to watch Chasm and Madeline Pryor start to develop a relationship towards the end of Dark X-Men, but it looks like now our crime-fighting antagonist duo are back within Spider-Man just in time for issue 47 of the main series. After the events of Web of Spider-Man 1, Chasm is on the loose. Spider-Man better track down his erstwhile and Hallows Eve ASAP. We're getting closer to Amazing Spider-Man issue 50. So this is the 47th issue of the series, written by Zeb Wells, featuring art from Todd Nowak and a cover by John Romita Jr. One thing to say about ASM 47 is that we have never had Todd Nowak art on the main comic book before. Frankly, Todd Nowak, I think, has really grown as an artist over the past couple years at Marvel. I am really interested to see if we're going to get artwork more akin to Stargirl, The Lost Children, and just how it's going to look like visually over on the page. Of course, we're going to have a big video review over on Amazing Spider-Man 47 when the issue releases in April. Please stay tuned here because I think there's going to be a lot to talk about as this series develops and head towards issue 50. Thankfully, though, we're still not done talking about the Amazing Spider-Man or the character of Chasm because this series is actually double shipping. So we're also set to get the next issue of Spider-Man. This one is issue 48. This one's still written by Zeb Wells, but it actually features art once again from Todd Nowak and a cover by John Romita Jr. You know, I just want to take a step back here and say objectively that I wish Marvel Comics would stop allowing John Romita Jr. to illustrate some of these covers within these series. I just don't think that all of his anatomy is precise. And I also think that some of the way he constructs like the visuals are just a little bit retro in terms of Marvel Comics. And I don't think advertises, some of the best sensibility of what this series has in mind. I wish Ed McGuinness was able to illustrate a lot more of these covers. I think there's this really interesting element of irony that he brings out in so much of his artwork that fits the Amazing Spider-Man as a series so incredibly well. Thankfully, though, it seems like I am going to be a lot happier with the interiors because they're written by Zeb Wells and illustrated by Todd Nowak. Peter Parker vs. Ben Reilly, Spider Man finally gets a rematch. Meanwhile, what is going on with Norman Osborn? Only 2 issues left until Amazing Spider Man issue 50. Yeah, very interested to see if Norman Osborn is headed back towards a villain or if he's going to stay on the side of the Angels. So many recent issues of Spider-Man has been teasing his reformation back into a villain here. So I am so thrilled to see if Norman's kind of pull back to the side of villainy is just going to derail this entire comic book, or if Zeb Wells is going to stick the landing and introduce an interesting element of characterization. So much to see, so much happening within the background of the core Amazing Spider-Man book. Once again, here, just so enthralled to see where Zeb Wells is headed over with Todd Nowak in the lead up to issue 50 of the main series. Next up, we have Spider-Boy. This one written by Dan Slott, featuring art by Paco Medina and a cover from Humberto Ramos. This one notable for me because it looks like Spider-Boy is actually going to meet the character of Madame Monstrosity that was introduced within a very early page, a much earlier issue within the core Amazing Spider-Man series. Also, I love Paco Medina as an artist, and I think this is probably one of the best Humberto Ramos covers that we've gotten this month from Marvel. We have the latest issue of Miles Morales Spider-Man. This one is still written by Cody Ziegler, featuring art and cover from Federico Vicentini. Fallout from issue 300. The climactic events of issue 300 have forever changed Miles Morales. But a Spider-Man's job is never done, and in fact, learning to live with the consequences of his actions might be the greatest job of Miles' life. Who will survive? What does the battle cost him? And what does the future look like for Miles Morales Spider-Man? AfroSF says, wow, you are harsh on JR's art today. I see your point, but I kind of love his blocky artwork. I love his new 52 Superman. AfroSF, yeah, I totally agree with where you're coming from. It's just, mainly it's on the covers. Because I do think his interiors are able to build like a great sense of like animosity between his characters. I do love his like big and blocky figures, but I keep seeing John Romita Jr. draw covers for not only the main Amazing Spider-Man series, but also for the main Daredevil series. And I feel like he's just not advertising, some of the best and most interesting part of what Marvel Comics has in store as a publisher. We looked at Mike Del Mundo. I have no idea why Mike Del Mundo is relegated to some of the variant covers over at Marvel Comics. He should be drawing the A covers for some of the most prominent series. Also, like Tarrant Clark is able to put this 3D rendering on his figures, but it just seems like much less synthetic than what we have from artists like Mike Deodato Jr. I think that if he were to draw the main Amazing Spider-Man series, you would probably see the sales go up on the book very, very quickly. I do like what John Romita Jr. has been contributing to Gang War. I just think as of right now, he's very limited in what he can contribute to comic books as an artist, unless he develops his style just in a different way. So once again, really, really hoping that Marvel will just kind of more vary up some of the artists that are illustrating their main covers. Why don't we talk about the latest issue of Spider-Woman? This one's still written by Steve Folks, illustrated by Ig Iguara, cover by Lionel Francis Yu. San Francisco bound. Brokenhearted, Jess decides to leave New York for a fresh start. But the trek across the country will not be a smooth ride. A new adventure starts here, introducing some new faces with some potential to become new champions. In terms of Marvel's Spider-Woman series, I'm a little bit perturbed that this book is shifting directions so early within its run. I do think it's interesting that Spider-Woman kicked off in the middle of the gang war with like a direct, antagonistic mission towards the character of Diamondback. But I'm wondering if this book will be able to survive an identity crisis so early within the scope of its runtime. That being said, I still think we have a solid creative team here with Steve Folks, Iggy Guara, and Lionel Francis Yu. Once again, I'll keep my eye on Spider Woman, but I'm a little bit concerned about just kind of the changing and shifting directions of this book so soon. And this is Superior Spider-Man. We're going to shout out the creative team and move over to the next book. This one written by Dan Slott, featuring art and cover by Mark Bagley. Next up, we have Spider-Punk. This is issue 3 of a comic book series written by Cody Ziegler, featuring art by Justin Mason. And frankly, I want you to take a look at this creepy new cover featuring Meridius on the latest issue of Venom. This is issue 32. This one features artwork from the excellent Ken Lashley. I've really enjoyed some of his work that he's contributed to DC. Really cool to see him on board the new Venom series, written over from writer Al Ewing with a cover from Kafu. Flesh and Blood Part 3. Back to the future in the greatest depths of space and time at the end of existence within the flowering fauna of the symbiotic Garden of Time, some carnivorous new species has blossomed, something blood red with thorns and an appetite. Meridius is so haunting within the scope of the main Venom book. The last couple of Al Ewing issues of the book have really brought the series back into this like sci-fi hellscape and has really showed just a crazy horror and science fiction direction for the Venom character. I literally cannot say enough good things about this series. This series is taking the Venom property and introducing all these brand new elements of continuity and time travel to make Eddie Brock, I think, feel richer as a character than he ever has been before. I hope moving forward, Marvel Comics will continue to explore Venom in a sci-fi direction, because I think it's so much more interesting than, having him stick around as a C or D list Spider-Man villain within the scope of that main book. So much good things to say about Venom, but I'm also equally as excited currently with Marvel's direction on the Carnage property. So this is Carnage 6, written by Toran Grunbeck, featuring artwork from Pere Perez, featuring that really harrowing cover over from Juan Ferreira. This one has been so much fun because Flash Thompson, the anti-Venom, has been pursuing the villainous Carnage. Flesh and Blood Part 4. Carnage and Cletus find out they're not as close as they once were. Meanwhile, there's still one thing that can kill them: anti-Venom. Yeah, I've just been so perturbed at how so many Spider-Man stories have taken on characters like Venom and Carnage and have ceased to do nearly anything interesting with them. In fact, this is where a lot of my criticism from Marvel's Spider-Man 2 video game comes from. I feel like Marvel's current Carnage and Venom comics easily surpass that video game and just feature storylines set generations into the future of Marvel. These are some of the comic books that has me so interested in seeing the future of what Marvel can foster with the symbiote characters. And once again, I just think in all the adaptations of other media, we should start working with this stuff. We should start working with characters like Meridius. We should start utilizing Flash Thompson as the anti-Venom, and maybe showing Carnage as an antagonist to a strong protagonist in order to craft a really interesting story. Yeah, I'm really loving this brand new Carnage series. If you haven't checked it out, you owe it to yourself to do so. Okay, I'm going to take like a very fast break to clear my throat, and then we're going to talk about Captain America. So this is issue 8 of Captain America, written by J. Michael Straczynski, featuring art from Carlos Magno and a cover from Taran Clark. Captain America has the tools and the will to protect the Front Door Cabaret and its strange guardian Lyra from the onslaught of a fate worse than death. Now he just needs the strategy, but sometimes good strategy requires sacrifices to be made. I'm a little bit behind on Marvel's main Captain America series. I have kind of flipped through the interiors of recent issues. I've really liked what I've seen. The way that this book has continued to emphasize the history of Steve Rogers as a young man before he became Captain America has led to so many beautiful story scenarios and pieces of characterization. I like how JMS has been teasing out elements, kind of like with the Nazis and the occult mixing together within the background of that book. Carlos Magno is a really, really strong artist at Marvel who I've been introduced to recently. I think this should be nothing less than a really fun issue of the core Captain America book. Vengeance of the Moon Knight. I have not had the pleasure of starting Vengeance of the Moon Knight yet. I will soon. This one written by Jed McKay, featuring art from Alessandro Capuccio, cover by David Paratore. I think this cover is really, really wonderful. This is a strong way to sell people on the Vengeance of the Moon Knight property. The anatomy on this cover is incredibly precise, and the way that we have like different costumes that are similar to Moon Knight should really get maybe new readers a little bit more invested in checking this one out. Brawl in the Family. As the fearsome Hunter's Moon, Yaya Badir is the brother to fall to the fallen Moon Knight, Mark Spector. But there's an imposter loose in the city wearing his brother's face, and Badir intends to find out who they are by any means necessary. So this is the 4th issue of Moon Knight's brand new series. Amazing covers here. Looks like we have variants from people like Alexander Lozano, Jonas Scharf, Elizabeth Tork, and Dyke Ruan. Really cool stuff. Yeah, I was really interested in seeing how Elizabeth Tork would be able to render like the extreme horror-based elements of Vengeance of the Moon Knight. This is a super fun homage cover featured here. Power Pack Into the Storm. This book is out now. This is issue 4 of a 5-issue limited series featuring legacy creators Louise Simonson and June Brigman headed back to the property. Let's check this one out. The Power siblings are free from Snark and Brood clutches and on strict orders not to interfere with the battle. But with their friends still at enemy's mercy, interfering seems like the last thing the Power Pack could do. But the Powers aren't the only ones looking to take action. One wrong move could have explosive consequences. I am nothing short of a supporter of Power Pack Into the Storm. I want Marvel to utilize Louise Simonson and June Brigman's incredible talents to create even more work within the Marvel Universe. This time, I want the publisher to put it firmly within the scope of continuity. I think allowing Louise Simonson to write the main Jean Grey series was a big step forward for Marvel, and I really want to see them continue in that direction. I think it is so cool that we have a creator so instrumental to so many interesting things with the X-Men line, with Inferno, with Louise Simonson. And I think it would be nothing short of a shame to not have her and, frankly, Chris Claremont involved in whatever the future of the X-Men property looks like in print at Marvel Comics. Night Thrasher. Written by Jay Holtham, featuring art from Nelson Daniel. This is issue 3 of a 4-issue series. I think looking to kind of revitalize Night Thrasher as a character. In the wake of his battle with the OG, Night Thrasher is caught between the forces of law and order and some of his oldest and closest friends. Dwayne must find a way to keep Harlem from exploding into violence, even if it costs him everything. Yeah, Night Thrasher has always been a joke within the scope of Marvel Comics. It'd be super interesting to see if this creative team can maybe create lemons out of, or lemonade out of lemons here. The Incredible Hulk. The detail in Nick Klein's cover is just really capturing, my attention here in a big way. Truly amazing work over on The Incredible Hulk. I really love the tone of this series, even if I'm not reading it month to month to month. This one written by Philip Kennedy Johnson, featuring art from Danny Earls. Hulk smashes frozen Charlotte once and for all. The monstrous, ethereal, demonic, angelic, frozen Charlotte has plagued New Orleans for centuries. And it's high time to put a stop to it, and Hulk is just the guy to do it. Plus, Eldest makes another tempting offer to Bruce Banner. Yeah, for me, I think one of the other really fascinating elements about Immortal Hulk are all the, or excuse me, I keep saying Immortal Hulk because it's just ingrained within my head. Yeah, one of the really interesting things about Incredible Hulk is how it's been able to utilize all these like villains as well. I think this interpretation of Frozen Charlotte is just a really immersive way to catch readers interested in whatever the future of this book has in store. Captain Marvel. I haven't checked in on this latest run from Alyssa Wong and Jan Bazaldua, but I really like the creative team, and I'd be really interested to check this one out eventually here. Next up, we have the latest issue of Fantastic Four. This is chapter 19 of the series, still written over from Ryan North, featuring artwork from Carlos Gomez and a very cool cover from Alex Ross. Next up, we're going to talk about the latest issue of Blade, written by Brian Hill, featuring art from Elena Casagrande. We're going to read the solicit on this one because it might have some clues as to what's going on in the Blood Hunt. Blade vs. the Adana, Round 2, Fatality. The Adana already ruthlessly defeated Blade once, but after honing new vampiric powers and gathering an army for the dead, Blade is ready for a rematch. At stake, the fate of every soul on Earth. So it looks like as the Blood Hunt is developing at Marvel, Blade is stuck in a battle with the villain known as the Adana. Really immersive cover from Lionel Yu, showing Blade driving a sword into this brand new character's chest here. Doctor Strange issue 10 has an interesting group of characters sporting some really strange outfits here. This is the 14th issue of the book, written by Jed MacKay, featuring art from Pasquale Ferry and a cover from Alex Ross. A living game that has taken root in Manhattan, transforming parts of the city into a dark fantasy world, Doctor Strange and his secret defenders have managed to insert themselves into the narrative, but they're not alone. Can Strange and company learn the rules and rescue those trapped within? Or is it back to the Dark Ages for the Big Apple? In terms of Jed MacKay's Doctor Strange series, I do think that the main Strange book with Clea as the protagonist just had a stronger flavor. However, I do like the fact that these two characters with Doctor Strange and Clea have reunited within the scope of this main book. But for me, it feels like there was something novel and there was something special about Clea serving as the protagonist that's just a little bit lost within this book. I do think that there's a really fascinating scenario constructed here, and watching Doctor Strange work with the Secret Defenders could definitely lead to some fascinating scenarios and elements. I still really like Sensational She-Hulk. There's really strong relationship drama between She-Hulk and her love interest, Jack of Hearts, and so much other kind of like relationship drama and issues stemming from Jen's kind of legal day job as well within the pages of Sensational She-Hulk. This is the 7th issue of the series, written by Rainbow Rowell, featuring art from Andres Gunolet and Jen Bartel. Andres Gunolet, I actually think, is probably one of the best artists at Marvel. He's just got a great sense of line that he illustrates to each issue of the interiors. And once again, as an artist that is able to capture the subtext of what these characters are thinking in such great detail. It was supposed to be a vacation, but now She-Hulk is fighting for life on a space station orbiting the sun. Recently, She-Hulk scuttled planes of the space crime lord Drapurg to destroy Manhattan, and he's out for revenge. If that weren't bad enough, someone is also out for emotional revenge as well. But is it aimed at the She-Hulk or the Jack of Hearts? One of the other saving graces about the main She-Hulk series is that it features these Jen Bartel covers that just have such clear anatomy and always take on just a really interesting like sense of activity for the characters. The way that She-Hulk and Jack are kind of glancing at each other in interesting poses within the issue is really, really interesting. And it's also great to just see these characters in like a slightly different context, like at a pool, as opposed to these superhero crime fighting aspects that we see in like each and every issue of She-Hulk as a series here. So really love the emphasis on the romance elements within the sensational She-Hulk, and I really hope the publisher just continues to utilize those interesting elements that creators Rainbow Rowell and Andres Ganolet bring to the core book. So I would say this is probably one of the best covers we've seen from John Romita Jr. this month. I wish it was illustrated by probably a different artist like the core Daredevil artist Aaron Kuder, but there's at least a strong sense of anatomy on this cover here. I have been really perplexed with this latest run on Daredevil written by Saladin Ahmed. And this run, and this particular issue, looks to be a special one amidst Daredevil. Let's check in and see what Marvel Comics has in the store for Daredevil issue 8. A dragnet is closing around Matt Murdock, also known as Daredevil. Police on both sides of the law are hunting him. Something vicious with a deep connection to Matt's very soul is hunting his friends, and in the midst of that chaos, an old foe with the blood of Matt's closest allies on his hands returns. Daredevil is a book that feels really like it feels like the stakes are incredibly high in that core series right now. In addition to to this gang known as the Heat, which is working with some of the police in New York City, there's also these terrifying monsters kind of disguising themselves as sins that keep influencing some of Matt Murdock's friends within the scope of the book. Also, Matt Murdock is currently a priest within the pages of the core series looking after the St. Nicholas Youth Home. So in the pages of Daredevil, it feels like there's more obstacles and more things in the way that Matt Murdock has to fight with than ever before. I think this latest run on Daredevil has been absolutely amazing. I've loved each and every issue of the core series, and Saladin Ahmed is just great at pacing Daredevil 2. The way that he's been able to introduce, some of these elements of demons and use it to comment on Matt Murdock's kind of like religious elements as he's a priest has been so fascinating. Aaron Kuder's work on the series is so wonderful and imaginative. He always finds like the most interesting way to tell the story. I cannot recommend this new run on Daredevil enough. Daredevil is one of my favorite characters, and I don't really think the Chip Zdarsky run ever really spoke to me in the way I wanted it to, but even though this run is so early in, I think the tone is absolutely perfect. Could not be more happy with what Saladin Ahmed and Aaron Kuder have contributed to Marvel's main Daredevil book so far. Alien Black, White, and Blood issue 3. We're getting to some of the 20th century studios comic books at Marvel. We also have a What If issue of Aliens featuring a wonderful cover from Phil Noto. Look at one of the latest Predator titles. And man, this bleed over on the cover for Planet of the Apes issue 4 is really, really beautiful. Makes the whole image come alive here. Do you know who will be writing new X-Men books? I know one person, and that would be Gail Simone. I'm also really hoping, and I probably think that Marvel Comics will have Kieran Gillen stick around in the new run. I've loved so many of the creators that are currently contributing to the X-Men books, but I think like two of like some of the biggest names that I think absolutely like have to be there, or I'll be a little bit disappointed, are probably going to be like Steve Fowkes and Kieran Gillen. Steve Fowkes has like really recently started his career at Marvel and just seems to be such a big fan of the X-Men characters that I think giving him a book like that would be really cool. I wouldn't want anybody else to write Dark X-Men or a Madeline Pryor-esque series aside from Steve Fowkes. I'm also really selfishly hoping that Jerry Duggan is going to be able to stay on like the main X-Men series or maybe tell like a different X-Men book, but I just think X-Men works so well with him as a creator. Okay, I actually didn't see this. This is really interesting. I know a lot of people are really big fans of cross-gen, and a lot of them were saying that Marvel wasn't going to reprint more material. It looks like we finally have an omnibus from Mystic. This one is written by Ron Mars, Tony Bedard, and Barbara Kessel, penciled by Brandon Peterson, Steve McNiven, Kevin Sharp, Fabrizio Fiorentino, and Al Rio. Okay, there's even more names. I'm going to read every name, but I'm going to take a quick throat break here. We also have Aaron Lopresti, Paul Ryan, Paul Pelletier, George Perez, and Claudio Castellini. Covers by Brandon Peterson and Aaron Lopresti. Yeah, a lot of people are excited about cross-gen. Let's check out the solicit for the Mystic Omnibus. On a world where society is based upon magic, ultimate power rests in the hands of the last person who wants it. Giselle Villard, a professional party girl. The carefree socialite may live on Ceres, a planet rife with sorcery, but she wants nothing whatever to do with it. Meanwhile, her sister Genevieve has devoted her life to one of these 7 mystical guilds that preside over the world. But when a mysterious event grants Giselle the sigil, a mark empowering her with uncanny abilities, it changes everything. How will Giselle handle this new power and unwanted responsibility that put her at odds with the guild masters, her own sister, and the world's greatest evil, Animora, a creature of almost limitless power who nearly destroyed Ceres once before? Collecting Mystic 1 to 43, Cross-Gen Chronicles 5, and material from the Cross-Gen Chronicles 1. So many cool creators featured on Mystic that are so important to the comics industry right now, like Steve McNiven, Paul Pelletier, Aaron Lopresti, Ron Mars. And this actually cover for the Mystic Omnibus is exclusive to the direct market, illustrated by Aaron Lopresti. Yeah, really hope Marvel will continue to publish more of these omnibuses for cross-gen books moving forward. Cool stuff here. Okay, we also have an Excalibur omnibus. I've actually never read this. I would love to pick this one up. This is the 3rd omnibus here, written by Scott Liddell, Evan Skolnick, Richard Ashford, Chris Cooper, Todd DeZago. Oh, and it's also written by Warren Ellis, Fabian Nicieza, and John Ostrander. That's insane that John Ostrander wrote Excalibur. Penciled by Brian Buccellato, Ken Lashley, Terry Shoemaker, Ian Churchill, John Royal, Amanda Connor, Terry Dodson, Derek Gross, David Williams, Carlos Pacheco, Casey Jones, Rob Haynes, Chris Marinin, Richard Burnett, Jander Sema, Tony Daniel, Steve Scroce, Aaron Lopresti, and more. And we have a direct market cover from the wonderful Joe Mad. So cool. I'm also really happy to see Marvel publishing a new omnibus for the Busiek and Perez Avengers run. This was a really great run. I've actually had the chance to read this one in full, and I think it still really holds up. Also, it's kind of cool to see Firestar in this book too. And oh boy, the artwork from George Perez is nothing short of amazing. This is a George Perez direct market variant cover. That's so beautiful, honestly. And look, we even have one from Alan Davis. I'm sure you've seen this image before. It's pretty legendary. Okay, it looks like there is the 2nd volume of the Stan Lee Archie Goodwin Invincible Iron Man omnibus. I think the Salvador LaRocca cover is just a little strange. Much prefer this original cover featuring Gene Colan's art. Next up, we have the 3rd Iron Man omnibus. This one featuring Gil Kane art. Really amazing. But I do like this Gil Kane Submariner cover more. Extreme X-Men. This one was actually written by Chris Claremont. featuring art from Juan Babio, Igor Cordy, Milo Manara, and Paul Smith. That's actually one of the best Salvador Luranist. Afro SF, yay, cross gen. The Mystic series was good. I'm surprised they haven't made a TV show. I have quite a few issues. Negation was the best cross gen series. I hope eventually I will find some kind of excuse to read all of cross gen. I've heard nothing but good things, and I did like that the cross gen issue that Marvel published recently. If Marvel publishes any new cross gen stuff in individual issues, I will absolutely cover it. I know there is a fan base that really loves that material. The old Ultimate Universe has never been more interesting to me as it has right now with the new Ultimate Universe. I especially know nothing about the Ultimate X-Men either. Man, I really hate these Masterworks covers, but absolutely love this run from Chris Claremont on X-Men. I think this one is even uglier. The smaller the covers are presented on these actual collected materials, I think the worse the actual covers are for these books. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. Once again, we have a masterwork for the Amazing Spider-Man. So I definitely read this. I read this in Marvel's Essentials line because I was really poor, and it's really easy to take those black and white issues that aren't in hardcover and travel around with them. Yeah, I actually never read the original Fantastic Four run from Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. I need to go back and check that out. I did read the John Byrne run. I think the John Byrne run is a little bit uneven, but there's really great stories, so I can't say like don't check out any of it. What else we got? Jim Rugg's Hulk. That is such a cool way to represent the Jim Rugg Grand Hulk Grand Design series. Really cool and just innovative way for Marvel to collect these Grand Design books. This one is kind of cool. Luke Cage right now is the mayor of New York City, so it feels like he has a lot to do in the middle of the gang war. I haven't really checked out the main Luke Cage book, but I might eventually. Yeah, I feel like if you go back and read Amazing Spider-Man's Gang War and Trade, it's actually quite phenomenal. Watching the way that all the plot threads kind of spun into motion in like slow motion as you read the series issue by issue is going to be nothing short of phenomenal. In particular, I think if you read Amazing Spider-Man Gang War and track characters like Janice Lincoln and Madame Mask as they slowly begin to shift in the narrative, you can find a lot of really, really interesting ways to like really engage your brain and get lost in some of the plotting in the main Amazing Spider-Man series. I think if you're going to read this book, reading it in trade is absolutely the way to go. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Incredible Hulk. I actually might end up picking up this volume too, as I'm a little bit behind on this series and have pretty much enjoyed every issue of the main Hulk book I've read. Black Panther. This is another book that I really need to get caught back up on. I love the way that Eve Ewing and Chris Allen have kind of broken off some of T'Challa's resources, and he's just been stranded across Burn and T'Chaka, trying to figure out what to do next. Looks like we have a collection for the Sabretooth War. Honestly, I'm not sure about this. If anybody is reading this in chat, let me know. Astonishing Iceman. I'm a big fan of this miniseries. I think this one would read pretty well in trade. I like Steve Orlando. I think Vincenzo Carratu's art is surprisingly great. The way that he's able to like show off some of Bobby's snow powers is really, really beautiful. And I love the sequences in Antarctica between Bobby and Romeo. If you haven't checked out Astonishing Iceman, you probably should. Alpha Flight. I have not really checked out Alpha Flight during Fall of X. If anybody has, if anybody's read the whole thing and liked it, do let me know. Uncanny Avengers. I find myself a little bit conflicted on Uncanny Avengers. I think there's a lot of good elements to it, but I don't know how strong the series progressed the plotting in terms of Fall of X. I feel like you can see that in terms of some of the other X-Men books. If you lower your expectations and just go in for some really interesting characterization between X-Men and Avengers characters, I think there's a lot of fun to be had here. But if you hype this up like the second coming of Uncanny Avengers and just the next era of Marvel, I think the book falls short. X Force. X Force has been really good during Fall of X. To be honest, I haven't always been a fan of some of the artwork from Robert Gill. I think some of the artwork has held X Force as a series back just a little bit here, but I still think there is so much interesting plotting within the scope of the main series between the storyline with Colossus and Beast that I can't do anything but recommend X Force in the middle of Fall of X. Alpha Flight seems fun. Yeah, I agree, Rez. I have not read Fantastic Four from Ryan North in such a long time. If anybody else in chat is reading this, let me know. Capwolf and the Howling Commandos. This one I had high hopes for because it's written by Stephanie Phillips, illustrated by Carlos Magno, but I still don't know. There's too many comic books coming out from Marvel, and I think I'd probably catch up on the main Captain America series before reading this one. Punisher. Yeah, Punisher just doesn't speak to me as a character, but I love the new identity for the Punisher and just how ambitious this one is from David Pepose and Dave Wachter. Amazing covers on this series from Rod Rice. And I feel like this book is going to appeal to a lot of people that aren't me. Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi, written by Jody Hauser, featuring art by Salvador Larroca and a cover by Phil Noto. Man, I don't know about this one. Salvador Larroca's art is a really, really tough sell for me, but I do like Jody Hauser's writing and the character of Obi-Wan Kenobi. I am really happy to see that Marvel is publishing a new Iron Man book or a new iteration of Matt Fraction and Salvador Larroca's Iron Man. This was like one of my formative comic books. This is one of the very first comic books that I really read seriously, and I think it holds up just so incredibly well. That's cool. We have an epic collection for Captain America from Stan Lee, and I believe it's Gene Colan. Haven't read this one, would love to check it out eventually. Brand new Avengers epic collection here too. From Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, and Larry Evie. We have a David Michelini era Avengers epic collection covering the 200th issue of the series. Man, I am really finding myself missing how quirky the Avengers cast was back then. Wonder Man, Beast, Yellow Jacket, Jocasta. So many interesting characters. I wish we'd get a return to this team eventually. Maybe minus some of the boring Marvel mainstays like the Odinson and Hawkeye too. Star Wars: The Old Republic Legends. I don't even know what this is. The Amazing Spider-Man Assassin Nation. I've read a lot of the old Amazing Spider-Man issues. I have never read David Michelini's run. If anybody has good things to say about this, let me know. Because I am interested in maybe trying to read every good Spider-Man story ever written. Maybe, eventually. We'll see. Amazing Spider-Man Epic. Oh, this is the Len Wein run. I also haven't read the Len Wein run. Daredevil Fall from Grace. Yeah, this is a really epic book as well. I've heard some kind of harrowing things about this one in particular. And Marvel also is kind of exploring this too with the Daredevil Black Armor series. We have an epic collection for the X-Men featuring just a late storyline within the Chris Claremont run. Also featuring John Romita Jr. artwork too. Here is a Tom DeFalco run of the Thor the Lost Gods. Never checked this one out either. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and wind down our stream today. Wow, there are just so many collections in terms of this overall solicits. All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming aboard and checking out our stream. I think it was a blast going over all those Marvel solicits. My voice is absolutely decimated at this point. Tomorrow, we will have a stream. We will be back. Let's see what we're going to be getting into here. I'm going to center myself too so I don't look so weird on camera. All right, let's see what we have for tomorrow. We're going to talk about Immortal Thor, Batman and Robin Annual. We have a preview for Dead X-Men. We might preview the end of Titans Beast World. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff to do. We have some Kamala Khan stories. We're going to talk a little bit more about the roxon Thor. Yeah, it's gonna be a big stream tomorrow. Thank you so much. Oh, Miracle Man. Oops, oops, oops. Yes, yes, yes. I will do some extra work and we will make sure to cover Miracle Man in some scope, in some capacity too. That last issue was amazing. I hope you enjoy it afterwards, Seth. K, Fantastic Four is good. Ryan North is doing a great job. One of the best runs so far. I check it out for sure. Really good to have that feedback. Everybody, thank you so much for coming to watch the stream and sticking around for so long. If you would, please give our stream a like. Please subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for coming aboard. We will be back tomorrow for just an incredible stream talking about the latest and greatest in the scope of Marvel Comics. Thank you so much, and I will see you very soon.